There is a parking lot in Mallorca where people go to sleep at night. Not in hotel rooms with sea views, not in the whitewashed villas whose photographs fill the travel magazines, not in the luxury apartments that tourists rent for €3,000 a week. They sleep in caravans, in motorhomes parked on asphalt, sometimes in the shadow of the resort complexes where they spend 12 hours a day making sure that somebody else's holiday goes perfectly. They are waiters and cleaners and receptionists and maintenance workers. They are the people who hold the tourist economy of one of Europe's most coveted islands together, shift, service by service, season after season. And they cannot afford to sleep indoors. This is not a fringe phenomenon. This is not a handful of people in an unusual situation. This is what the housing crisis in Mallorca looks like from the bottom, from the floor of the tourist economy, where the people who make the paradise function have been priced out of the paradise entirely. Where a one-bedroom apartment in Palma or the resort municipalities costs €1,200, €1,400, €1,600 a month, in a country where the average hospitality wage leaves almost nothing left over after that rent is paid. Where the platforms that rent the island's housing stock to short-stay tourists have converted so much of it that the long-term rental market has effectively ceased to function for the people who need it most. And in 2025, the year Spain broke its own record with 94 million international tourist arrivals, the situation in Mallorca did not improve. It got worse. The hotels filled up faster. The platforms booked out months in advance. The seasonal job openings in the hospitality sector multiplied. And the workers who showed up to fill those jobs discovered that the island that wanted their labour did not have anywhere for them to live. Today, Behind the Facade is going to take you to the hidden side of Spain's paradise. Not the side that appears in the resort brochures, the side that nobody photographs. The side that is visible if you look from the parking lots. But first, if this is your first time here, Behind the Facade is a brand new channel. We produce investigations like this from scratch, original research, original scripting, original storytelling, that costs real time and real work. We are not backed by a network or a studio. The only thing that puts this channel in front of the people who need to see it is your subscription. When you subscribe, you tell YouTube's algorithm that this content is worth recommending. For a channel at the stage we are at right now, that is not a small thing. It is everything. 3 seconds to subscribe and ring the notification bell. It makes an enormous difference. And then let us get into the story that the tourism industry does not want you to see. Mallorca has been selling itself as paradise for decades, and it has been extraordinarily good at it. The island, the largest of the Balearic archipelago, anchored in the western Mediterranean between the Spanish mainland and the North African coast, has a geography that does its own marketing. 300 kilometers of coastline, much of it the kind of turquoise water, white sand scenery that fills the aspirational imagery of half the travel magazines published in Europe. A mountainous interior, the Serra de Tramontana, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, with stone villages and olive groves and a quality of light that painters have been documenting for centuries. A capital, Palma de Mallorca, whose old city mixes Gothic cathedrals and Arab bathhouses and Renaissance palaces in a density that reminds you, if you arrive from most other European cities, what genuine architectural history looks like. Add to that a flight time of 2.5 hours from most of Northern Europe, a near guarantee of 300 days of sunshine a year, and 40 years of continuous investment in resort infrastructure that has made the island one of the most efficiently organized tourist destinations on the planet, and you understand why Mallorca has become what it has. Not a destination, a brand. A word that when used in conversation requires no further explanation. You are going to Mallorca, everyone knows what that means. What the brand does not communicate, what the travel industry has a structural incentive to never communicate, is what the island looks like from the inside, from the perspective of the people who are not on holiday and never have been on holiday there because they live there or try to, and the cost of doing so has become something that the average human wage in the hospitality sector cannot support. Spain's tourism record in 2025, 94 million international arrivals, the highest in the country's history, was celebrated as the definitive proof that the Spanish tourism model works, that the years of investment and promotion and product development had produced something genuinely world-class. And in the narrow terms in which tourism success is usually measured, arrivals numbers, spending totals, hotel occupancy rates, the celebration was justified. The numbers were real. But behind those numbers, in the Balearic Islands and specifically in Mallorca, another set of numbers was also accumulating. Numbers that do not appear in the Tourism Ministry's press releases. The number of available long-term rental properties in Palma, which has been falling for years as short-term platforms absorb housing stock. The number of rental listings in the resort municipalities of Alcudia, Calviá and Pollença. which is close to zero for anything a hospitality worker could afford. The percentage of the island's total housing stock estimated to be in short-term tourist use, a figure that by various estimates now approaches a third of all habitable properties in the most affected coastal municipalities. And the average rent for the smallest available long-term lease in Greater Palma, which crossed €1,200 and then kept going, €1,200 a month. For a single small apartment in the ordinary residential areas of an island whose economy is built entirely on the work of people earning between 11 and €14 an hour. Do the arithmetic. A full-time hospitality worker on the sector's standard wage, working 40 hours a week with no overtime, earns roughly €1,700 to €900 gross per month. Call it €400 to €1,600 net after social security contributions. Paying €1,200 in rent means spending between 75 and 85% of your take-home pay on accommodation. Nothing left for food, transport, healthcare, clothing, any form of saving, any form of life outside the transaction of working to pay for the place where you sleep. And that assumes you can find the apartment at all, which, in the summer months when the demand for rental housing peaks alongside the demand for seasonal staff, you very likely cannot. So what do people do? Some commute from Palma's outer districts or from neighbouring municipalities where rents are lower but the distances are longer, an hour each way by bus, because the island's public transport is not designed for workers, it is designed for tourists. Some sleep in the staff accommodation that larger hotels offer, where the conditions vary from barely acceptable to genuinely degrading, and where the cost is deducted from the wage, reducing the effective take-home pay further. Some leave, give up the seasonal contract, go back to the mainland or to another country, where the ratio of wages to housing costs makes more basic sense. And some, as Gdena Essa reported in recent weeks with testimony from workers who were willing to be named and interviewed, end up in caravans and motorhomes, parked wherever they can legally park. Sleeping on the island that the rest of Europe dreams about visiting, the caravan image is important. Not because caravans are inherently a symbol of degradation. People choose mobile living for all kinds of reasons, but because in this context, in Mallorca in 2025, the caravan is the solution that a skilled worker in a functional economy reaches when every other option has been eliminated by a housing market that has been entirely captured by the tourism industry's demand for short-term beds. The caravan is the residue, the thing left over when the market has converted everything else into something more profitable. The parking lot where the worker sleeps is not a campsite. It is the housing market's negative space, the place where the people the market excluded end up by default. And the tourism industry is not unaware of the problem. It cannot be. The same housing crisis that is putting workers in caravans is also making it structurally difficult for hotels and resorts to staff themselves adequately. The Balearic Islands have been reporting hospitality sector labour shortages for several consecutive seasons. Not because workers don't want the jobs, but because the combination of seasonal contracts, modest wages, and housing costs that have gone beyond what those wages can support makes the island functionally unviable as a place to work. You need somewhere to live to be able to show up for work. If you cannot find anywhere to live, you cannot take the job. And the resort that cannot staff its restaurant for the summer peak has a real operational problem that no amount of automation or schedule optimization can fully solve. The response from some of the island's largest employers has been, in its way, more honest than any official housing policy statement. They have started buying it themselves. Meliá Hotels International, one of the world's largest hotel chains, headquartered in Palma, with deep roots in the Balearic resort industry, has moved to acquire accommodation for its own seasonal and temporary workers because the private rental market can no longer serve as the background assumption. Reuters reported the arrangement as part of a broader pattern of large Spanish hospitality groups taking housing provision in-house, because leaving it to the market means losing staff to competing destinations or failing to attract the workers needed to meet the season's demand. Read that again slowly. A major hotel chain on its home island is buying housing for its employees because the market that should provide that housing has been priced beyond what those employees can afford. And the principal driver of those prices is the same short-term rental economy that the hotel chain's own customers use to book their holidays. The tourism industry is, in a very precise sense, eating its own workforce. The platforms that fill with tourists in the summer are the same platforms that have converted the housing stock that the workers who serve those tourists used to live in. The machine that generates the revenue is destroying the conditions needed to operate the machine. This is not a coincidence. It is the logical endpoint of an economy that has allowed residential property to function as tourism infrastructure. Once the market decides that a property is worth 3 times as much as a tourist rental than as a home, the conversion happens. Then the next property converts. Then the next neighborhood tips over. Then the municipality finds itself in a situation where the long-term rental market has effectively ceased to exist, and the workers who cannot afford to leave and cannot afford to stay end up in caravans in parking lots, while the hotels where they work fill up with people paying €200 a night for a sea view. The Balearic government has introduced measures. In 2018, it banned new tourist rental licenses in residential buildings, one of the most aggressive regulatory moves taken by any Spanish regional government at that time. The regulation was real. The enforcement was incomplete. The underground market for unlicensed tourist rentals continued to operate. The existing stock of licensed tourist apartments did not decrease. And the wider housing crisis, already driven by years of conversion before the ban, continued to deepen. Rents rose. The caravan population grew. The labour shortage worsened. And the island kept setting new tourism records. The Mallorca case concentrates, in a small geographic space, a set of contradictions that are present in milder form throughout coastal Spain, throughout southern Europe, throughout every destination economy that has allowed the logic of tourist consumption to colonize its housing market. But because Mallorca is an island, because there is a literal physical limit to the space available, because you cannot build out the periphery indefinitely, and there is no adjacent metropolitan area to absorb the overflow, the contradictions are more visible, more acute, and more impossible to manage by the traditional methods of urban policy, which generally assume that you can always grow the supply somewhere. There is no somewhere in Mallorca. The island is the island, the coastline is what it is, the housing stock is what it is. And the question of who get to live in it, the tourists who visit for a week and pay 3 times the market rent, or the workers who need to live there year-round and can only pay 1, is a political question dressed up as an economic one. It has an answer, but the answer requires choosing the worker over the tourist. And no Spanish regional government, in a region where 30% of the economy runs on tourism, and the national government is counting those 94 million arrivals as a measure of success, has been willing to make that choice with the full force of policy behind it. The seasonal nature of Mallorca's economy makes the housing trap uniquely vicious. In winter, the island contracts, hotels close, restaurants reduce to skeleton crews. The demand for rental accommodation falls alongside the demand for workers. And the short-term platform listings that push rents to unsustainable levels during peak season disappear from the market in November, freeing up apartments that briefly become available at prices closer to what a local wage can support. For a few months, the island is something like normal. You can find a place. You can almost afford it. Then March arrives. The platforms activate. The tourist season begins its ramp. The apartments that were available at €700 a month in February are listed at €2,000 per week in June. The workers who managed to find something for the winter find their leases not renewed. Their landlords switching back to tourist mode, their options collapsing again. They are back to where they started, but this time the season has already begun, the contracts are already signed, and there is no time to find an alternative before they need to show up for work. This cycle has been repeating for years, and each year it tightens. Each year the winter dip in housing costs gets smaller, because more of the housing stock has been permanently converted to tourist use and no longer re-enters the long-term market at all. Each year the gap between what the season's starting wage offers and what the cheapest available accommodation costs widens a little further. And each year the number of workers who decide the calculation does not work, who choose a different destination, a different season, a different country entirely, grows. The Balearic government's own labour market data shows that the islands are increasingly dependent on workers from mainland Spain and from abroad to fill the hospitality sector's seasonal gap, because the local population of working-age adults has been squeezed by exactly the same housing costs that make seasonal migration necessary. Young Mallorcans, people who were born there, grew up there, went to school there, are leaving for Barcelona or Madrid or Valencia, not because those cities are cheaper in absolute terms, but because the ratio of wages to rents is less catastrophic. The island is losing its own workforce to the crisis its own tourism economy created, and then importing workers from outside to replace them. Workers who arrive without housing, who discover on arrival that the market cannot serve them, and who either accept conditions that no one with options would accept or leave again before the season is over. The hotel chains that have started buying housing for their workers are not doing so out of philanthropy. They are doing it because they have done the math and discovered that the alternative, a season short-staffed because the housing market cannot supply the accommodation that workers need, costs more than the property. They are, in effect, subsidizing a housing market that has been destroyed by the industry they are part of. They are spending money to repair damage that their own business model, and the platform economy that serves their customers has directly caused. It is the kind of circularity that appears throughout the tourism economy when you look at it from below rather than from above, a system generating costs that it then has to spend money managing, while telling the world that what it is generating is pure value. What does it mean that one of the world's most celebrated tourist destinations is generating a class of workers who cannot afford to live there? What does it say about the model, about the entire edifice of European destination tourism, with its record arrivals and its record spending and its record occupancy rates, that the people at the bottom of it sleep in caravans? It says something that the tourism industry does not want to examine. It says that the paradise being sold is not a shared one, that the island of light and turquoise water and authentic Mediterranean living is accessible, at its core, to the people who can pay for the access. That the workers who clean the hotels, serve the food, maintain the pools, drive the transfers, who are, in the most literal sense, the infrastructure of the paradise, have been priced out of the place they make possible. They are allowed to work in the paradise. They are not allowed to live in it, and when their shift ends, they go back to the parking lot. In the 1960s and 1970s, when Mallorca's mass tourism industry was being built, there was a social contract implicit in the model. The island would welcome visitors in exchange for prosperity that was broadly shared with the workers, the families, the communities that sustained the tourism economy. That contract has not been formally cancelled. Nobody signed a document ending it. It has simply been dissolved, gradually, by the accumulated effect of 1,000 individual property conversions, 1,000 platform listings, 1,000 decisions made by property owners who chose the better economic return. The prosperity is still there. It is just no longer shared. It has been concentrated upward into the hands of the property owners and the platform economy and the global hotel chains, while the workers at the base of the system are left to solve their own housing problem from the back of a motorhome. The paradise is still beautiful. The beaches are still there. The light is still extraordinary. The photograph still looks the same. But underneath it, in the parking lots and the overcrowded staff dormitories and the remote outer suburbs where the commute adds 2 hours to every working day, the social architecture that used to give the paradise meaning has quietly collapsed. And the people who are living inside that collapse are not tourists. They will not leave at the end of the week. They are the ones who stay. And they have nowhere to stay. Subscribe if this is the kind of story you think needs to be told. And drop us a comment. Do you think Spain's tourism model is sustainable? Or has it already passed the point where it can fix itself from the inside?